Hum inside my heart a little while. Come closer with the honey of your song. Your dance is a code, is a pathway to what's given. I am learning how to listen.
Hello, friends, and thank you for tuning in today to the Lost Sutras Podcast. My name is Danya, and I am so thrilled that you are all here. And I'm really excited to be bringing my friend Cindy Spratt onto the podcast today. I first met Cindy a couple years ago. I was in the midst of planning and organizing a rites of passage for young women. And Cindy came into my realm because she works very closely with young women in particular in recovering from eating disorders. And since then, I have began to follow Cindy and have been truly inspired by her offerings and just the role that she plays in our community. So it feels like a huge honor and blessing to have her on the podcast here. Cindy is a registered holistic nutritionist, eating psychology counselor, and eating disorder recovery coach specializing in culinary and functional nutrition, while offering online and in person workshops and cooking classes, individual counsel, and retreats. She weaves her areas of expertise by infusing nutritional education with emotional and mental guidance and culinary passion. It is her mission to help individuals make realistic, long term, and sustainable life changes for thriving health. So, before we begin, may we all take some time to ground into this space and into ourselves. Let's begin by taking a deep inhale through the nose and exhale out the mouth. Thank you all so much. Let's begin. So, good morning, Cindy. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thank you so much for meeting me here in this digital space.
Yeah, I appreciate the offer to be here.
Oh, it's such an honor to have you on here. I'm so inspired by all that you offer and everything that you are. So thank you for being here exactly as you are and sharing that with the listeners
Thank you.
and with me. So I'd love to start this out by learning more about you. So would you be open to sharing a bit more about your story and how you got here in this space?
Yeah, of course. I am currently a practicing holistic nutritionist. I am currently specializing in eating disorder recovery and dysfunctional eating recovery. But I do all kinds of different work with digestive system and autoimmune conditions and weight loss and cancer recovery and all kinds of different avenues. I think living in the Kootenays, we have a tendency to be like jacks of all trades within our field of work, which actually suits me just great. Um, I got here, it's a bit of a long story, but the abbreviated version is that I had a health crisis when I was in my early 30s after just having had my son. And they found a cancerous tumor in my colon, which I then had surgically removed. And which really led me down a really intense path of recovery and study. And so, along with my recovery from that surgery and health crisis, I also began to study nutrition, went back to school, changed my life, changed my career, changed my path, and really found a new aligned path that has 15 years later has landed me in this position of being able to work with people in a really beautiful way and support people in their own health journeys. And so that was the beautiful gift behind my health crisis. Yeah, so I think that's kind of like the short version.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
I love how you ended that off. The beautiful gift from the health crisis. I feel like that's really wise to share it in that way. I feel like there's so many people that go through these really intense moments and they feel that pressure. And of course, in the moment, it feels like a lot of pressure. And um, are maybe when we're in that space, it's hard to see the lessons or the benefits or the blessings that comes with all of that, right? Um, so yeah, that sounds like it was quite an intense moment for you in your early 30s. And it's a really common story I hear for mothers, like myself included, after having their first child, that different health issues start to arise, whether that be with, and for most women I meet, actually, it's connected to autoimmune or digestion. And so in your line of work, with that being your story, has that been kind of the main focus as you were offering? Are you working a lot with young mothers as they are learning the hormonal imbalances and all that stuff that comes with the journey of motherhood?
There's certainly a good deal of that happening. I think with the way that our cycle changes, into our mid to late 30s, I think that's a very common challenge for a lot of women. And I certainly see that a lot in my work and focus on that with a lot of my clients. However, a lot of the work that I do is really centered around recovery from a disordered past or disordered relationship with food that's current. And that kind of work spans from young women, teenagers, to women in their 30s with young children, to women in their 40s like me, to some of my clients are in their 60s and really looking to go down a deeper healing path with an old rooted wound or issue that continues to surface. So that's really where a lot of my work comes from and is and lies in my practice right now. And I love that kind of work. I've had my own journey with an eating disorder prior to the cancer, was a really big part of my own story. And I kind of believe was part of the health crisis as well. Some unhealed emotions, issues, and then, of course, a neglect of the digestive system for so long. So, yeah, there's so many aspects of health with women that there is such a need for support in all other holistic areas. So that makes my work continuously exciting, and I'm always evolving as a practitioner because of that.
Thank you for that. I would love to hear more about your main work right now because you and I have chatted about that before, and I'm really excited to hear more about that, especially in this space. But before we dive into that, I really want to hear more about your personal journey, if you're willing to share more about how that cancer cells, you said you went through surgery and then that called you to go back to school and switch your career and everything. So, as a holistic nutritionist, was it really the path of eating like whole foods and focusing on your nutrition that helped recover from the cancer, or was there other areas that really brought you back to the space of balance?
Yeah, I think the call to nutrition specifically was very strong for me because I have always been a foodie. I've always been really, really into food. Even with the eating disorder, it's funny because it kind of twisted into an obsession for a while in a negative relationship. But the passion for food was always there. So post surgery, I was just in a place of absolute crisis, and the medical system really wanted me to do what they called then the full Fox treatment, which was rounds of chemo and radiation. And I was a young mom. My son was a baby, and I'm sure the idea of going through chemo for anybody is extremely intense and frightening. However, for me, I didn't see any logical reason why I would put myself through that, given that the surgery had really looked after the cancer. It had taken out the mass. There was no indication that it was anywhere else in the body. And so I was kind of left in this position where I'm like, if I choose to go with the medical system, then I kind of succumb to the medical system, and I don't mean to knock it in any way, because it's there for a reason. It's very supportive for a lot of people and saves lives regularly. But for me, I was like, if I'm not going to do that, how can I take the power into my own hands and and live my life so that the cancer doesn't ever return? And so that was the beginning of the studies that led me into the holistic nutrition program. My husband was a big part of that. Him and I both just started studying like maniacs, like alternative therapies, like the role of nutrition and how powerful that was, and really starting to follow and be influenced by people like Chris Carr, who are advocating for holistic routes to dealing with not only recovering from cancer, but preventing it. And so I really went down this path of like, oh, wow, we get to change how we do everything. And I mean, we thought we ate really well at the time. And now knowing what I do, there was so much that we were able to transition in how we ate regularly and the supplements that we took. I returned to athleticism, which was a really big part of my process and still is. And then, of course, the spiritual, emotional, energetic journey that comes along with not only healing, but living a thriving life that aims to prevent disease. So it was really all those beautiful pieces of holistic living that I began to pull into our lives. And like I said, my husband as well. So I went to the I don't know, you could call it extreme or not, but I went to the measures of like removing all the metal from my body, for instance, and having our house tested, having our water tested for carcinogens and pesticides, and removing any kind of toxins that we could control out of our living environment. And so like there was a lot of moving pieces. And in the beginning, it was really a lot and intense. And then, of course, once you establish a new way of living, then it's just maintenance. And so now we're at a position where we just maintain that kind of lifestyle. Every once in a while, you have to step back, reevaluate, make some adjustments, and then move forward again. And of course, in the world of nutrition, the information is always evolving and changing. And so, being a practicing practitioner in that field has allowed me to keep my finger on the pulse with regards to what's changing in the world of research and supplementation, science, and then of course, like practices that are out there, like other practitioners like yourself that are doing and providing healing modalities that can be woven into what I do as a nutritionist. So it's all of those parts. It's in one.
Thank you. I love that it's such a fully rounded offering that you hold and you carry. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. How empowering it must have felt to be so intuitive with your own healing path. And again, not to knock Western medicine, there is a role and a place and a time for it, and it has saved a lot of lives, which is beautiful. But I do feel like in our modern society, there's such a heavy reliance on it that we're forgetting more of these innate or like esoteric paths that were used for thousands and thousands of years for healing, including diet and nutrition, right? The idea in Ayurveda is that food is your medicine. And so it's really beautiful to see this kind of coming back, or this remembering that's happening in our modern society, where people are faced with these intense decisions of, do I go through chemo or not while I'm a young mother and I have a young baby? And or do I listen to that intuition within me that says, don't don't give into the fear. There's nothing representing that it needs to happen. So what else can I do to provide myself that that balance and that harmony. So there was some points you brought up that I'd really love to touch on again. I love this idea of like holistic nutrition, right? That idea of like, how do we meet all levels of ourselves, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual, through the food that we put into our bodies, which are the building blocks for ourselves. And you even touched on that nutrition can play a larger part in the wellness plan. So I'd love to hear more from you on how you find food or diet does feed all those parts of ourselves.
Mm. Yeah, it's a big topic, and I mean, obviously one that I really like to talk about. And one of the things that I really like to teach people is that food is only half the story. Like what we're eating is only half the story, and who we are as eaters is the other half. And so in my work, I am very commonly educating about the role of eating real food as much as possible, whatever that means to you. I try not to buy into diet culture and even like the current trends of, cleansing, or the latest kind of like autoimmune protocols, or specific trends. Autoimmune protocols, I guess, are a little bit different where they're specific to a disease. But what I mean is like, more like a keto approach that people are adopting and taking on and trying. And I instead like to lead people towards following a path that with food that really aligns with who they are. And so eating from the ground, eating from the earth is of course should be a priority really for all of us, predominantly over eating, processed foods. And a lot of people, we know that. Um, and yet it aligns more for certain people to eat more meat. It aligns more for certain people to go down the path of veganism for various reasons. And I really like to support my clients wherever they're at with their individual needs and also with their individual choices. And so that's always one piece. Like, what are we eating? How can we make the diet really full of nourishing, accessible nutrition for the most part? And then also, who are we as eaters? Like, what does our food relationship look like? What happens when we're eating? Are we sitting down in a calm environment, in a loving, supportive, safe space? Or are we eating on the go, always on the run, eating while we're driving, tuning out, with our hands in the chip bag kind of scenario? And that plays a huge role in how the body actually accepts the nutrition, accepts the nutrients, and allocates them properly. And of course, like, where is our stress level? That's tied all into our food relationship as well. That example of eating on the go, or eating when you are not in a good place, not feeling good, feeling anxious, etc. Your body actually deals with the caloric intake differently when we're stressed as opposed to when we're relaxed and we're sinking into our parasympathetic nervous system. So I think it's always about designing a diet that really works for the unique person. So if it's someone like me who's had a past with cancer, my diet is really focused on cancer preventive nutrients, antioxidants, acid alkaline balance kind of thing. Whereas if I'm looking at a different kind of client whose goals are, weight loss, or who's dealing with Hashimoto's and thyroid support, then we want to design a diet that's unique to that person as well. And then always looking at the emotional, mental, spiritual health of the person at the same time. Who are they as eaters? How are they eating? Are they eating fast? Are they eating slow? Are they eating in a stressed environment? Or are they relaxed, etc.? So those are kind of like all those really important pieces to what is a holistic approach to diet. I hope that answered your question.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I really love that thought. It's not something I've ever thought about, well, I've thought a lot about how important it is for our nutrition to be whole and all that stuff. And then there's the other aspect of how are we actually ingesting the food. I've dove in deep into that because again, in Ayurveda, there's this big understanding of how many times do you chew and is it silent and where are you eating and how do you treat the food when you're cooking it, right? And all sorts of stuff like that. But I love that aspect that you just brought up that it might also be a beautiful way to check into one's mental or spiritual state of how are you actually eating? Are you just shoving the food in? Are you swallowing it whole? Are you distracted as you're eating? And that's kind of a cool way to tune in and notice like what's actually coming up within yourself. So yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. I thought that was a beautiful point. And so with this idea of like forming new habits and new eating habits, um, you've talked a lot about how you're specifically working with people in doing this. And so what are some tips or some guidelines that you offer to people who are trying to form more balanced habits for themselves?
Yeah, thanks. I love that question. Yeah, there's lots of really great ways. One of the most simple logistical ways that I find really supports all people is finding a really good food rhythm that works for you. I mean, most of the people that I work with are busy. A lot of us are busy because the world is busy, and a lot of them have children and jobs and hobbies and activities that we're trying to cram into our lives. And so finding a food rhythm that works, again, specifically for you is a really good way to help the body kind of get a really good amount of nutrients throughout the day and also balance the blood sugars. And this is a place that I start working with most of my clients because a lot of them are just a little bit sporadic with their meals, or they're finding that they're missing meals, or they're not snacking regularly. And then they're, finding that they're desperate for food, or they're making poor choices because they haven't planned, they haven't planned out their snacks or their meals. And so what that generally looks like is, a regular rhythm throughout the day of input that is fairly planned. In that for some of my clients, they like to write it all down and know exactly what's coming because that really works for their life and their personality. And for others, they like to really go a bit more intuitively with it. Kind of depends on who you are. But what that really looks like is an intake in the morning, like 3 meals: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then 2 snacks in between. So breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner. And if that sounds like a lot of food, it doesn't necessarily have to be large amounts of food. It's like topping up the tank regularly so that you are never in this place of feeling bottomed out. Because as soon as you feel bottomed out, we get desperate, and our blood sugars end up sinking. And maybe we're so hungry that sometimes people will say, like, I got so hungry that my hunger signals actually ended up just shutting off. And then we begin to create these kind of negative habits where we're up and we're down and we're up and we're down and we're all over the place. Whereas if we establish this really good food rhythm, we have like a little bit of a trickle effect with the energy coming into our body, into our cells, into our bloodstream, so that instead of getting like a whole bunch of glucose, for instance, at once and reaching for, a sugary muffin, for instance, we plan out maybe an apple and an almond butter snack where we're going to get a trickle of that glucose into the bloodstream. So instead of spiking with something really refined like a muffin, I'm talking like a store-bought muffin, really refined will bring us up here, give us some energy for a small amount of time, and then we will sink. And so if you ever noticed, especially if you have children, if you've noticed, they've had a day, or you've had a day where you're kind of eating all over the place and maybe some of the wrong things, and you feel like kind of jacked, maybe you had a coffee and a muffin and you're like, woo, zoo, I'm going to go run up a mountain. And then a few minutes later, you're like bottomed out and like, I don't know why, but I feel terrible. I can't focus. I'm having trouble working. And then you reach for sugar because the body is physiologically asking for sugar when your glucose is bottomed out. So this idea of a nice, good food rhythm throughout the day sets you up for success. It sets you up to like kind of stay in this like happy medium, what I like to call the golden zone, as opposed to going up and down out of the golden zone. We kind of stay in this really great balanced place. People feel better. They have more energy. They feel more focused. They sleep better. It helps us get on top of hormone imbalances, immune system imbalances. It can support with better digestion, depending on what we're eating, of course, always, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just like, it affects absolutely all the other bodily systems, what's happening with our blood sugar throughout the day. And also, like, if we're topping up those nutrients regularly, then we'll be feeling energized enough and more focused enough to stay pretty even throughout the day. So that's one of probably the biggest keys that I work with on my clients, all the time, regularly.
Wow, thank you for that. I love that idea of the golden zone. That really highlighted how sweet that space can be when we continuously are topping ourselves up instead of allowing ourselves to burn out or go through those extreme spikes, like you said. There's been a couple of times you've now brought up this idea of creating habits and meal plans specifically for what people are going through, and I really love this idea. Again, this is like a heavy foundational part of Ayurveda is the unique constitutions, right? And in Ayurveda, they talk about the doshas. And I think it goes even beyond that because, as you said, people go through different things throughout their life, whether that be cancer, or autoimmune, or eating disorders, or whatever that may be. And so I loved how you brought up this idea of creating habits specifically for people's uniqueness, or as you said, people's own rhythm. And a word that I love to bring into this when I talk about yogic diet and the trainings that I offer is intuitarian. Like, how can we tap into that intuitive aspect of ourselves and notice what is actually right for us? Because for some people, meat is what we need. For some people, meat is not what we need, right? And how can we bring in that aspect of like non-judgment into our diet and our eating plans? And so I'd love to hear more from you on this idea of people's unique rhythm and that idea of how can we release those emotions that we may be tying to our diet, whether that be shame or guilt or fear, and really just be able to find that resilience in knowing what our body needs and feeling nourished through that.
Yeah, thank you. Um, One of the really important places that I usually begin working on when we're looking at, increasing your intuitive awareness or intuitive depth in and around food is just increasing your curiosity and awareness. So if we never ask or wonder why, some foods work or some foods hurt our belly or some foods, make me feel nauseous and this and that, all these different kind of feelings that arise, then we will never be open to receiving the answers. So increasing our awareness is a very important place to begin this kind of work. Um, you know, have I been eating the same thing every single day? And if I am, why am I doing that? And is it even working for me? And can I tune in to eating something different this morning and then seeing how that goes? How does that feel? How does it feel in my body? How does it feel in my belly? How does it feel in my mind? And then collecting information from that awareness and from the tuning in. And this is like it's working a muscle. Developing a new habit is about dedication, patience, and sticking to a rhythm and a routine that implements the same thing all the time. And so I like to equate it with like working a muscle. So if I want to increase the strength of my biceps, I can't just work out one day every 2 weeks. It's not going to accomplish anything. So if I work my biceps a little bit every single day over 2 weeks time, I'll probably notice an increase in my strength. So the same can happen with developing any kind of habit and behavior, especially around food. So if you're like, I really feel like I need to be consuming a smoothie a day, I know that would be good for me. I know that like feels really good in my body, then the practice is integrating it every single day and being in tune with how it all feels. So a couple of tricks that help, folks increase their kind of intuitive nature around food is to like listen, increase your awareness, and also start a journal. And this is different than a food journal. A lot of people are actually triggered by starting a food journal where they write down exactly what they eat, how much, how they're feeling. There is a use for that sometimes, but I mean more of like a food relationship journal where it's like, today I had a great eating day. I was listening to my needs. I allowed myself to listen to the signaling that came from my digestive system. I knew when I was hungry, and then I sat down and I ate my food in a calm environment, and I went slowly with my food and I chewed it really well, and that really felt really good. And what I'm noticing is, or what's coming up for me is, and then a different day might be, I had a challenging day with food today. I noticed that I checked out when I was eating, and I ate in the car and I ate in a rush, and I missed a meal. So then I ended up grabbing a brownie and a bag of chips, and I didn't feel good. And the emotions that were coming in for me were guilt and shame. And what's that all about? And, it's a great place to learn about what your food relationship looks like now, and where are maybe some aspects that need some work. And I can't tell you how many times in sessions with clients they'll say, I took that journal entry suggestion that you gave me, and like, whoa, did I run with it? And these crazy big things came forward for me where I learned this about myself. I learned, like, I have certain kind of emotional connections to things, or days when my emotions feel kind of like all over the place. It's actually really connected to how I'm eating, and that's like amazing information. And so the journal is a really great place to work. One of the other things I really advocate for is like quieting your eating environment, taking out stress, taking out distractions, going away from a screen, going away from anything that elicits any stress within, which sometimes can even be difficult conversations with your partner. Put everything aside, focus just on the food, just on the meal. I know this feels like a lot for a lot of people, but even if you can do it one time a day, just for dinners maybe, and like inviting gentleness into the body, inviting peacefulness into the body, loving energy, connectedness with the food, taking a couple deep diaphragmatic breaths before you eat, that can really start to enhance the communication between the gut and the brain and help the body sink into more of an intuitive kind of nature in and around food. And the signal to the body is, you can relax. Like, this is a beautiful, joyful, peaceful, safe time to be eating. And, you don't have to have your back up. We don't have to clench and stress the digestive system, and we can receive the food in a really nurturing way. So, like, journal work, increasing awareness, and then of course, like having a really calm, quiet, slow, relaxing eating environment. Those are all things that you can do to help increase this kind of relationship with food.
Wow, thank you so much for painting that beautiful picture. In all of that, what kept coming up is mindful eating is an art and it's a practice. And as you said, it's like a muscle that we can keep exerting and building, the more that we bring intention towards it, intention and attention. And how much that can offer this deep reflection and the ability to listen to our body's natural intelligence. And I think that with our modern society, a lot of people have learned to not trust their bodies. And when we can step into this space of listening, we can have this remembrance of the intelligence that we already carry and that intuition that we already carry. And that in and of itself is such a deeply spiritual practice. So thank you for painting that awesome picture, of bringing that in through our mindful eating practice. And there was another thing you brought up through that share that I would love to um, Google search a little bit more in your beautiful brain, of this gut brain connection. This is kind of a hot term these days, and I would love to hear it from your perspective of what this connection is and the role that it plays in our eating patterns.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating thing to learn about. Honestly, I feel like I will never stop likely learning about the digestive system and its connection and relationship with the rest of the body. It's so important. Um, and so, yeah, there's a really unique messaging system that communicates between the gut and the brain. And we talk about physiologically, we have a nervous system, we have a central nervous system in the body that is doing lots of communication and sending lots of messages all over the body at all times. And we've been learning as the science and research is evolving, that we actually have an incredible enteric nervous system that exists just in the digestive system. And a lot of people think, like, when you put your hand on your belly, that's where your digestive system is, and it is mainly there, but your digestive system actually runs from, your lips. It actually can kind of be involved when you smell food, because that elicits a response in the brain. And and your mouth, all the way down through your digestive system, out through your anus. And so it takes up a really large volume of the body. And in this incredible system are billions of nerves. And the nerves are communicating with the rest of the body all the time. And so when it goes back to this term that we've used for centuries, like, I have a gut feeling about this, or my gut is telling me, there's actually a real physiological, scientifically proven reason for that, because there's a whole nervous system that exists just within the digestive system that is receiving information from food and from particles and cells, and it's communicating that up throughout the system, which is coming up and down and reaching the brain. It reaches the brain through that main vagus nerves that travels up your spine. And so what's really cool about this is it is involved so much, like the nerves are really involved in what's happening with our digestive system and how we are assimilating the nutrients from our food. So one of the biggest pieces to talk about here is like stress. And when we're stressed and we eat in a stressed way, and even if that means that, you have a bit of a negative relationship with food, where if you eat a brownie, it might elicit feelings of guilt or shame or upset, that's going to affect what the body does with those nutrients. Is it going to store them away in fat cells because it feels threatened? Is it going to break them down and allocate them throughout the body where it feels those nutrients need to go? And so is it going to create gas? Is it going to create, holding and tension throughout the rest of the body, because, you have this emotional connection with the food? And so what's really cool about this is, quieting that nervous system, soothing the digestive system, not only with real food, nurturing foods, foods that are particularly nurturing for the digestive system, but also with the sympathetic, with that calming energy, those deep breaths, the reducing the stress in the environment and within, that helps the body receive the nutrients in a different way. And for a lot of people, they have severed this messaging system between the gut and the brain. Like I said, that that messaging system that happens is really important, because that's how we receive signals that we're full. We'll receive signals that we're hungry. We receive signals that, oh, I really want to crave some pumpkin seeds because the body is deficient in zinc. I'm really craving magnesium, and so the body is asking me for chocolate. And if we sever that signaling system by eating in a checked out way, we eat mindlessly, we eat in a stressed way, we are just kind of shoving food in our mouths, we're eating a lot of processed foods, we start to sever that messaging, and we no longer begin to hear the messages in the way that they're meant to be. And I work with my clients like this on this a lot, and I feel like it's a constant thing that we need to bring attention to, so that we can support that messaging system. And you'll see it in children, actually, because they haven't been so influenced from society yet. They're so much more intuitive and so much more innate with a lot of their food things, where you'll see that they don't have a tendency to overeat, for instance. They don't have a tendency to eat when they're not hungry, for instance, because that's just not what the body is looking for, and therefore that's not what the brain is asking for. So yeah, this gut brain connection is just like a fascinating world where you could get like deep into the science, if that's the kind of thing that floats your boat. But that's kind of like, a simple explanation as to the role of that gut brain connection, and then of course the role and importance of looking after the enteric nervous system that exists within the digestive system and listening to it.
Wow, thank you for giving us that map. It's intricate, but it's nice to have some orientation when figuring out that connection. I've been hearing this common theme lately of the gut as the second brain, and diving into that relationship deeper myself. So it's really nice to hear a professional really speak to that in the language that is more scientific. So thank you for sharing all of that. Um, there was just a little piece at the end there that you shared that I'd love to talk more about and connect back to. As you said, your main work these days is working with young people moving through eating disorder recoveries. And you were talking about how as young children, we have more of that intuition. We're not as swayed by society or our own emotions or hormones or whatever that may be. Um, and I'd love to hear more about how, if you think that shift of um, being more into that intuitive nature, into maybe being more feeling pressured by society, if you see that connection is what brings forth some of these eating disorders that you are working with young people in particular.
Absolutely. I mean, the role of society is massive, and we are at our most impressionable when we are moving through our adolescent years. There's a lot of developmental things that are happening within the body, and then there are also a lot of influences that are coming from society and peers, and pressures that are still very prevalent. I think we are coming back right now. At least I want to believe we're coming back to a place of beginning to speak more about dysfunctional relationships with food and body, and that they're still here, because I think for a while They reached kind of this real big peak in the 70s, and the diet culture was just taking off. And that was kind of like around the time that I was being raised. And then it kind of petered out and we stopped talking about it. And, now we talk a lot more about maybe trending cleanses, like I mentioned earlier, or like health diets that are, supposed to be health oriented, but are still kind of targeting people to manipulate their bodies in a certain kind of way to achieve a certain kind of goal. And so, yeah, I think the influence is still really strong out there. And now with social media marketing and the social media influence, there's just like, it's coming at our young people from all sides at all times. Um, which it sounds a little defeating, unfortunately, but there's so much that we can do as parents and, of course, as practitioners and educators to help our young people learn that they can have a really beautiful, supportive, loving relationship with food and body, and that there are a lot of easy pieces to that, providing them with really good food on a regular basis, with real basic nutritional education, with cooking skills, teaching them to be in the garden, teaching them to put their hands in the dirt, taking them to other businesses that are promoting local food, etc. And so I think that the influence is there and it's still really, really very strong. And there's also really big movement towards real food, whole food style eating, and eating locally, eating from the ground, eating from the earth, and paying attention to, our carbon footprint and where is our food coming from, and food sustainable issues long term. And I was really happy they brought a project into one of my son's high school classrooms, where we grew some microgreens over the holiday break together. And he did a really big presentation on the benefits of not only consuming microgreens, but of like what it means within the food system to be integrating things that you can do at home, how much money you're saving, how the nutrient access and absorption changes whether you grow it on your windowsill or it travels to us from California or Mexico, etc. So I think there's still lots of awareness out there. Everything you do matters. Everything you do as a parent matters. Everything you do as an influencer, an adult in somebody else's child's life, it all matters. So the more voices that can stand up for eating well and building loving, positive relationships with food and body, the better, because the social beast, the social influence is not going anywhere. So we have to do everything we can to really provide our kids with as many tools as possible.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying all of that. And as you were sharing, it brought up another point or another question that I have for you. In terms of access, so I just want to acknowledge like how amazing it is to have this privilege to be here to even speak about diet and nutrition and choosing what we eat and what we ingest into our bodies, right? And I have this conversation often with people who come from low income households, or, people who live in areas of the world where they don't have the resources to really think about how they are nourishing themselves and they're eating for survival. So, do you ever work with people that are in that same space? And if so, what kind of offerings can you bring forth to them that maybe increases their access to clean and wholesome foods?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do occasionally work with clients in lower income brackets for sure. I was just actually having this conversation with a young client recently, where financials are, tight. And I mean, I think we're all feeling the pressure of the economy right now, and a lot more people these days are feeling the financial pressure and wanting to eat really good food, and yet not having or not feeling as though they have enough access or enough money to keep up with the demands of their families. So it's an important question, and I think there's a lot of different ways that you can go about getting really good food into the diet still, even if there's not a lot of financial freedom. Um, Growing food is number one, absolutely. And no matter where we live, there's a capability to grow some food, at least in part, whether it's on your windowsill, it's on your balcony in a big city, it's on a tiny little portion of your yard, or maybe you've got, the capacities to start movement towards a community garden, wherever you are. That is huge. Growing our own food is huge. And if there's a way that you can store food, if you grow a lot of carrots and you can store them in some kind of capacity to last you throughout the colder months, it's going to save a lot of money. The other one is, I think that, and a lot of people forget about this, beans and legumes and grains are very affordable in their dry volume. So, you can go getting them organic locally where we live. There is a beautiful distribution company that is Organic Matters, and you can buy lots of stuff in bulk and store it away. That if that's not accessible wherever you live, like, you can find a place to buy those beans, legumes, grains in bulk and store them in the house, somewhere in a cool, dry, dark place. Glass jars is an ideal way to store your food. And then that can provide a lot of meals, sustenance, and nutritional value to a lot of foods. Like, you can build a lot of meals off of beans and grains and legumes. And a lot of people, I think, miss, oh, lentils, or oh, adzuki beans, mung beans, and you can sprout beans and lentils, and you can put those in, on your fresh salads or in your soups, etc. So buying foods in bulk can be a really great way to support financial strain. And then growing food, of course, and being a smart shopper. I think a lot of people shop out of convenience, which a lot of us have to do. And yet that you can do it in a really smart way. And the client that I was just talking to, I was like, take some time, set aside a little bit of time. And a lot of stores have their produce and their ingredients listed online, where you can go online and you can check out, what their prices are like, and then, compare. Can I get this stuff from Costco? Can I get this stuff from my local superstore? Can I, and so the smarter you are as a shopper, the more money you'll save. And also, if you buy bulk items and you buy seasonally, because seasonal food tends to be a lot cheaper. In the fall, it's easy to get your hands on lots of squash, for instance, and squash can feed a lot of people with, in one fairly small package. So can I, take advantage of the squash that's available to me and that's really affordable right now, buy 5 or 6 and store them properly so that they can last me throughout the winter. And so a lot of it is planning. And so, time doesn't cost money necessarily. If you can sit down and do some planning and do some smart research around what's available where you are, and compare shopping, do some comparative shopping, buy foods in bulk, plant a garden. Yeah, grow some sprouts on your windowsill. Those are a lot of great things that simply just take a little effort and time.
Thank you for all that awesome advice on how to make it more accessible. Um, yeah, I know that this is like a really sensitive topic, the idea of diet and how we eat, because there can be such heavy emotions tied to it. Um, and yeah, as you were sharing, it reminded me of this man that I was introduced to a long time ago. I'm not in person, maybe one day, but through the internet world. His name is Ron Finley, and he's known as the gangsta gardener from downtown LA. What he really is a guerrilla gardener, and he started going. He lives in a neighborhood, grew up in a neighborhood where tomatoes from the grocery store cost more than a cheeseburger from McDonald's. And so he was faced with this idea that, I actually can't afford to eat healthy food, nutritious, wholesome food. Um, and so he started digging up the meridians in downtown LA and planting community gardens. And it was a big fight with the city for a long time, but he finally overtook, and many people are now supporting him, and he travels the world, I think, sharing this idea with people about how it's more accessible than maybe we make it think we originally think it may be. And so yeah, I have this conversation a lot with people, and it can become so sensitive because there's so many emotions tied to it. But thank you for sharing your insight on how we can make it more accessible, and that we do have the power, and that sometimes it just requires us to think outside the box a little bit further. And so that leads me to, I have one more question for you if you're open to sharing some more wisdom with us. With this idea of, our diet being so tied to mental health in particular, how do you guide your clients to finding more balance within that realm of mental health, so that they can properly be nourishing themselves?
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot that we can do through diet to support mental health and mental health imbalances. A lot, and a lot more, I think, than maybe people think. And a lot of folks out there like to just, add a supplement, add some vitamin D and add some omegas to their protocol or to their daily intake. And that'll work, and it may help a little bit, but if your foundational diet is not really rich in nutrients, and within the title nutrients we have vitamins and we have minerals and we have micro minerals, like there's a lot of needs under that kind of title nutrients, and if we're not meeting the body's needs with regards to nutrients, we develop deficiencies, and deficiencies are really, really common. And the more processed food we have in the diet, the more deficiencies we see. And there are a lot of common deficiencies associated with mental imbalances that a lot of folks out there don't know about. And so one of the really good things that you can do with the diet is just make sure that it's predominantly plants. Um, you know, I have stayed away in my, career as a nutritionist from adopting one kind of style of eating, which I spoke to a little bit earlier in our interview. And instead, I really like to promote real foods, mostly plants. If you've ever read Michael Pollan's stuff, he always advocates for, eat food, real food, mostly plants, not too much. And it's a fantastic philosophy. And so the more plants in the diet, the more nutrients, vitamins, minerals, the microminerals the body's going to receive. And so one of the, really great way to do this is, write them down. What are the vegetables that you love? What are the fruits that you love? Don't forget about beans and legumes. Lentils are so packed with good nutrition, nuts, seeds, and then, fish or meats if you like, and make sure your foundational diet is really full of a lot of those good foods. And then another important thing to do, have a daily smoothie. I cannot say this enough. It's something that I advocate for always with probably all of my clients and myself included, and for my son, for my family, because you can get so much nutrition into a daily smoothie. It's an easy thing to do. All of us, or most of us at least, have some kind of blending unit of some kind. And it's an easy way to throw, a base of things in there. For me, I usually use some coconut water because it's high in electrolytes. I'll use a little bit of coconut yogurt if I have it, or just a bit of plant milk, a half a banana, a bunch of frozen berries. That's my base, maybe a little bit of water. And then I'll always have a really good quality greens powder on hand. A scoop of that can go a long way and can support a lot of those micro mineral needs that a lot of us are not being looked after. And then you can do, protein if you want, a nut butter, maybe a really good quality protein powder like a hemp hearts or a hemp protein, that kind of thing. And then you can add from there if you have collagen powder, you have omega oils, or you have a probiotic. A daily smoothie is a really good way to check off a lot of nutrient boxes, and first thing in the morning, it's easy. You can sip on it all morning or down it, whatever works for your lifestyle. And I think that in mental health specifically, a lot of people just aren't looking after their daily needs. And nowadays, unfortunately, but realistically, we live on a damaged planet. And so we are always up against so much toxicity in the air, in the water, in the food, in the soil, in our homes. And so we need to up our nutrient intake game in order to help the body deal with, detoxify all these excessive toxic chemicals that we are exposed to at all times. And then of course, some of the really good supplements that, people miss or they forget about. Vitamin D is number one, especially if you live in Canada. We're not seeing enough of the sun, and we're not close enough to the sun for a lot of the colder months. So supplementing with some vitamin D3 is a really good practice to get into. I usually advocate for about 4,000 to 8,000 IUs, but you can have your Ds checked and see where your levels are at. And then you can drop that down to about 1 during the summer months when you're closer to the sun. So vitamin D is a good one to supplement with. And then, fish oils, or making sure, at least if you're not supplementing with fats, that you're getting really good quality fats in the diet. So looking after good quality oils, just trying to stay away from those poor quality ones like safflower, sunflower, peanut, soya, vegetable, etc., and sticking to olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, flaxseed oil, those ones that are particularly really good for brain function and overall health, and getting rid of the toxic stuff as much as you can, and staying away from processed food and staying away from refined sugars. I mean, they're things probably most people know, but they affect your health so much, especially if they're in the diet regularly. So really looking after, can I stick to natural sugars? Can I make sure that I'm eating a plant dominant diet and eating mostly real foods, and keeping like those, not so great foods in a very small compartment in my diet if I'm not going to take them out completely, which is not really sustainable for most of us living in North America these days. So yeah, I mean, I think there's lots that you can do to look after your mental health, and all aside from nutrition, exercise, time outside. It's like the number one thing. Getting exercise. If you struggle with your mental health and you do not regularly exercise, number one, start with exercise. It can be as powerful at helping people maintain things like depression, or not maintain, but reduce things like depression and anxiety and even sleep disorders, as a lot of medications out there. Just getting like a half an hour of exercise, particularly when it's outside, movement. It could just be walking. It doesn't have to look like pumping iron at the gym. That's another really, really important part of getting on top of your mental health.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all those tips and tricks. You can tell that you really are a master of this field. So thank you for coming on here to share all your potent wisdom. I'm walking away with some newfound knowledge, and I'm super appreciative to you for coming in here to sharing all of that.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been such a privilege having you on here. So thank you, Cindy. Have a great day.
You bet. You too.
Thank you all so much for tuning in today. What an awesome conversation that was with Cindy. I'm walking away with so much knowledge, and I hope that you all are as well. A quote from Cindy before we tune off is, "Eat to feel good and feel good about eating." If you would like to stay in contact with her, you can find her on her website at Cindy Spratt, spelled CindySpratt.com. My name is Danya Buak. I am the lead facilitator and founder of Wild Song Yoga School. Thank you all so much for tuning in and for stepping into this space of learning and growing with these potent wisdom keepers. It is a deep honor and a deep blessing to be here curating and magically weaving all of this knowledge for you. So thank you so much. From my heart to each and every one of yours, namaste.